The grand resonant chamber of the glyptal conclave shimmered with a light that was not merely seen, but felt. It was a symphony of solid-state luminescence, emanating from the crystalline architecture itself, each facet inspire a note in a silent, millennia-old chord of absolute order. Here, within the heart of their homeworld, the Supreme Council convened, their physical forms, towering, multifaceted beings of living silicon, arranged in a perfect spiral around the central dais. Their thoughts, translated into a cascade of harmonic frequencies, filled the immense space, a debate that was less a series of spoken words and more a complex, layered wave of pure reason and escalating anxiety. At the center of this storm of logic was a single, terrifying enigma, the species known as humanity. High luminary Xylo, his own crystalline structure a deep, contemplative sapphire, felt the dissonance in the chamber as a physical pressure. He stood near the periphery of the inner circle, his position affording him a view of every resonating facet of his peers, and he saw fear refract through their logic like a flaw in a perfect gem. For generations, the Glyptal had observed the humans. They had watched them spill out from their single, unremarkable star system with a chaotic, almost violent energy. Their ships were brutalist constructions of processed metal and chemical fire, crude and asymmetrical, a stark offense to the Glyptal aesthetic of crystalline perfection and energy field propulsion. Their communications were a cacophony of overlapping emotional broadcasts, a messy, untidy spectrum of noise that bled into the pristine silence the conclave held sacred. They were ephemeral, their lifespans a mere flicker against the geological timescale of a single Glyptal's existence. They were, by every metric the conclave valued, longevity, order, harmony, purity of form, an inferior and deeply unsettling form of life. Yet they were expanding, relentlessly. And now they had breached the cordon. They had entered the silentium. The silentium was not merely an empty region of space. It was a sanctuary, a quarantine enacted eons ago by the conclave's most ancient predecessors. It was a place where the fundamental laws of the universe were said to be thinner, a place of cosmic reverence and existential dread. And the humans had just sent a fleet into its heart, without permission, without preamble, without any apparent understanding of the sanctity they were violating. Sentinel Prime Vorlag, his form a jagged obsidian construct that seemed to absorb the chamber's light, pulsed with a frequency of pure, cold fury. They are a contagion, his thoughts resonated sharp and percussive, cutting through the murmuring harmonies of the council. A biological plague that has achieved spaceflight. For cycles we have debated, we have observed, we have tolerated their discordant presence on the galactic rim. But this is an act of aggression. They have spat upon the precepts of the elders. They have defiled the sacred void. Vorlag's logic was simple, brutal, and compelling. He advocated for an immediate and overwhelming response. The Celestial Armada, a fleet of warships that were less vessels and more mobile extensions of the Conclave's will, should be dispatched to the Silentium. They would excise the human presence with focused beams of coherent light, sterilizing the system and restoring the sacred silence. There would be no communication. To communicate with chaos was to invite it into one's own logic, to risk contamination. The humans were a problem to be solved, a variable to be eliminated from the grand equation of the cosmos. A significant portion of the conclave resonated in agreement, their collective light shifting toward the hard, unwavering crimson of martial intent. Xylo, however, felt a deep and troubling counter-resonance. It was a vibration of doubt, a subtle harmonic of unease that cautioned against such certainty. He revered the traditions as much as any, but his role as a luminary was not merely to preserve the past, but to illuminate the future. And the future he perceived was clouded by this rash, unthinking response. He focused his own resonance, a calm, cerulean blue, and projected it toward the center of the chamber. Sentinel Prime, his thoughts flowed, smooth and measured, a river against the jagged rocks of Vorlag's anger. Your assessment of the humans as chaotic and disruptive is not without merit. Their expansion is untidy. Their methods are dissonant, but to assume their actions are born of malice is a failure of logic. It is an emotional response, the very thing we find so distasteful in them. The crimson light of the chamber flickered as Xylo's point struck home. Vorlag's obsidian form pulsed with irritation. High luminary, they have crossed a line that has stood for 1,000,000 of their fleeting generations. Their intent is irrelevant. The act itself is a declaration of war. Do the precepts of Th. Elders not warn us of this? Do they not speak of the ruin that comes from those who do not respect boundaries? From a shadowed alcove high above the council floor, a new frequency entered the debate. It was faint, ancient, like the whisper of cosmic background radiation. It emanated from Elder Kalen, the last of the first spire, a glyptal so old his crystalline form had become clouded and opaque, his inner light a dim, flickering ember. He rarely participated in the conclave's proceedings, serving only as a living repository of the most ancient knowledge. The elders warned us, Kalen's thoughts echoed, each one a slow, deliberate drop into the silent pool of the chamber. They warned us about the breaking of the silence. They spoke of a new age, a time when the galaxy would be filled with the clamor of young voices. They did not, however, command us to extinguish those voices. They commanded us to listen. Vorlag's resonance sharpened into a spike of defiance. To listen to what, Elder? The meaningless static of a transient species? Their brief, violent history is an open record. They consume, they fight, they destroy. They are a fire raging through the dry grass of the cosmos. We are the guardians of this garden, and it is our duty to put out the fire before it reaches the ancient trees. He gestured with a crystalline limb toward the star map suspended in the center of the chamber, a swirling hologram of the galaxy. A single, angry red dot marked the location of the human fleet within the shimmering nebula of the Silentium. They are there. Now, while we debate, their corruption spreads. The time for listening is past. The time for action is upon us. The sentiment swayed the conclave once more. The chamber's light intensified, the call for action overpowering the subtle frequencies of caution. Xylo felt his own logic being overwhelmed by the collective will. To stand against it would be to declare himself an outcast, to break the sacred harmony of the conclave. Yet, a deeper instinct, a logical intuition he could not ignore, told him they were on the precipice of a catastrophic error. The warnings of the elders were not simple instructions. They were complex, layered philosophies. To interpret them with the crude literalism of a military commander was to miss their true meaning entirely. The humans were unpredictable, yes, but unpredictability was not the same as hostility. Their chaos might be a different form of order, one the glyptal, in their rigid adherence to structure, could not comprehend. What if they are not there to conquer? Xylo projected, his voice a final, desperate plea for reason. What if they are there for a purpose we cannot yet conceive? The Silentium is unique. Its properties are anomalous. Is it not possible they were drawn there not by a desire for territory, but by curiosity? The same curiosity that is the foundation of all true knowledge. He turned his focus to the holographic map. We see their ships as weapons because we think in terms of conflict. What if they are instruments? What if their purpose is not to transmit, but to receive? What if they have entered the Silentium not to break the silence, but to listen to it more closely than we ever have? The idea was so alien to the conclave's mindset that it caused a momentary lapse in the debate. A flicker of genuine confusion passed through the chamber. To the glyptal, silence was a state of being, a sign of purity and order. The idea of actively listening to it as if it contained a message was a paradox. Vorlag seized the moment of hesitation. A fanciful theory, high luminary, he resonated, his tone dismissive. But we cannot risk the sanctity of our most sacred space on a philosophical whim. The celestial armada will be dispatched. They will approach the human fleet and deliver a single, final ultimatum: withdraw or be annihilated. It is a compromise. It is more than they deserve. The conclave resonated in firm, final agreement. The decision was made. The great crystalline spires of the chamber pulsed with a unified, resolute light. The command was sent, rippling through the substrate of their world to the orbital shipyards where the armada waited in perfect, silent formation. Xylo felt a cold dread crystallize within him. He had failed. He had allowed fear to triumph over reason. He looked toward the shadowed alcove where Elder Kalen resided, but the ancient being's light had dimmed to almost nothing, his presence a silent, sorrowful judgment. The glyptal, in their quest to preserve order, were about to commit the most chaotic act of all. They were about to declare war on a species they did not understand, and in doing so, they were ignoring the very warning their elders had left for them. No one was listening. And Xylo feared, with a certainty that chilled him to his core, that they would all realize their mistake only when it was far, far too late. The celestial armada moved through the void with a grace T belied its immense power. The ships were not built, but grown, each one a single, flawless crystal lattice honed over centuries into a vessel of war. They sliced through spacetime without turbulence, their energy fields parting the interstellar medium like a prow through still water. From the command nexus of the flagship, the harmony of judgment, Sentinel Prime Vorlag watched the Silentium nebula grow from a faint, ethereal haze into a magnificent, swirling tapestry of gas and nascent stars. His obsidian form was rigid, his focus absolute. Beside him, High Luminary Xylo stood as a silent observer, his presence mandated by the conclave as a final, formal check on military authority, though both knew it was a hollow gesture. The decision had been made. Their sensors, which perceived the universe as a complex interplay of energy frequencies and gravitational resonances, detected the human fleet long before it was visible. The human ships were a discordant screech in the otherwise placid symphony of the nebula. Their power sources leaked chaotic radiation. Their engines left a messy trail of charged particles. They were, to Vorlag's senses, like a smear of filth on a perfect lens. As the Glyptal fleet emerged from faster-than-light transit, they arranged themselves in a crescent formation, a gleaming arc of crystalline power that dwarfed the human presence. The human ships were unimpressive. They were blocky, asymmetrical, their hulls a patchwork of dark, non-reflective metals. There were fewer of them than intelligence had suggested, and they were scattered in a loose, seemingly random pattern throughout the heart of the nebula. Vorlag allowed a pulse of contemptuous satisfaction to resonate through the command nexus. "Observe, Luminary," he projected to Xylo. "The vaunted expansionist power of humanity, a disorganized rabble. They have no concept of tactical formation, no discipline. They float aimlessly like debris on a solar wind." He gave the command. A single, pure white beam of energy was projected from the harmony of judgment, not as a weapon, but as a communication channel, a carrier wave of immense power and clarity. Upon this wave, they sent their ultimatum, translated into the clumsy, mathematical language the humans used. The message was simple: you have trespassed into a sacred domain. You are a source of dissonance. Leave this system now, or your existence will be harmonized. You have one of your short-time units to comply. They waited. On the main holographic display, the human ships remained inert. There was no scrambling of fighters, no powering of weapons, no frantic attempt to flee. They simply continued their slow, deliberate drift. Vorlag's resonance hardened. "Arrogant primitives, they mistake our mercy for weakness. Prepare the cleansing beams." But then something happened. A response. It did not come over the carrier wave they had sent. Instead, it was a broad, omnidirectional signal, soft and calm. It was a simple repeating sequence of prime numbers, a classic greeting of a species seeking peaceful contact. It was followed by a data packet containing anatomical, linguistic, and cultural information, a standard first contact protocol, delivered with a startling lack of fear. Xylo felt a flicker of something akin to surprise. They were not responding to the threat. They were ignoring it entirely, as if it were an irrelevance, and instead proceeding with a peaceful introduction. "A trick," Vorlag resonated, though his certainty was momentarily shaken. "A delaying tactic. They seek to confuse us with meaningless rituals." Or, Xylo countered, his blue light flaring with renewed hope, "they are genuinely attempting to communicate. They are behaving not as invaders, but as explorers. Sentinel Prime, the Conclave's decree allowed for this. We must accept the communication." Vorlag hesitated for a fraction of a second too long, a sign of his own internal conflict. He could not, in front of the entire command crew, directly violate the Conclave's compromise, however much he disdained it. With a sharp pulse of reluctant agreement, he ordered the communications specialists to establish a secure, real-time link. The holographic display shimmered, resolving into an image from the bridge of the lead human vessel, the one they called the Odyssey. The interior was a shock to the Glyptal senses. It was not a grand, resonant chamber, but a confined space filled with soft lights, complex consoles, and other humans. The beings themselves were soft, fragile-looking creatures of flesh and fluid, their forms an untidy collection of limbs and sensory organs. At the center of the image stood one of them, a female, designated in their transmission as Ambassador Evelyn Reed. She was old for a human, her face a map of fine lines, her hair the color of spun silver. She wore a simple, dark uniform, and her posture was one of preternatural calm. There was no fear in her eyes, only a deep, penetrating intel. NCE and a profound weariness. "This is Ambassador Evelyn Reed of the Terran Alliance," she spoke, her voice translated into the Glyptal's harmonic language by their own computers. The translation was imperfect, stripped of nuance, but the core meaning was clear. "We acknowledge your presence and your message. We mean you no harm. We have come to the region you call the Silentium not for conquest or colonization, but for observation." Vorlag's resonance pulsed with incredulity and rage. He took control of the transmission himself, his harmonic voice booming through the human vessel's speakers. "Your presence is the harm. You have broken a quarantine that has stood for eons. Your observation is a violation of sacred law. The reasons for your trespass are irrelevant. You will withdraw immediately." Ambassador Reed did not flinch. She simply tilted her head, a gesture of quiet contemplation. "We understand your position," she said, her tone remaining impossibly level. "You perceive this space as empty, a void to be kept pristine. Your perception is incomplete. We did not come here by chance. We were led here." Xylo felt a jolt of pure, undiluted curiosity. He stepped forward, his sapphire light glowing, and addressed the ambassador directly, overriding Vorlag's furious resonance. "Led here? By whom? This region is uninhabited." The human ambassador looked directly at the visual sensor as if she could see Xylo himself. A faint, sad smile touched her lips. "Not by a being, by a phenomenon. For decades, our long-range sensors have been detecting a subtle anomaly, a pattern hidden deep within the cosmic background radiation. It is a shadow, a whisper, a statistical improbability that grew more defined the more we listened. Our models indicated that the source, or at least the clearest vantage point to observe it, was located within this nebula. Your nebula." Vorlag scoffed, his thoughts a wave of derision. "Lies and fantasies. Our sensors are the most sophisticated in the galaxy. We perceive the totality of reality. If such an anomaly existed, we would have detected it." "With respect, Sentinel Prime," Reed replied, her calm unwavering, "your sensors are designed to perceive harmony. You look for order, for predictable patterns of energy and matter. You are looking for the song. We, on the other hand, have learned to listen for the silence between the notes. The anomaly we are tracking is not a presence, but an absence, a progressive, systematic decay in the quantum foam, a slow, subtle unraveling of physical law." The concept was so profoundly alien, so fundamentally heretical to the glyptal understanding of the universe, that the entire command nexus fell into a state of stunned silence. The universe was a constant. Its laws were absolute. The idea that they could simply decay was unthinkable. It was a violation of the ultimate cosmic harmony. "You are mistaken," Xylo projected, his own logic reeling. "Or you are lying." "We are not," the ambassador stated simply, and then came the reveal. "We have not been idle since our arrival. Our ships are not warships. They are the mobile anchors for a single vast instrument. We have spent the last cycle deploying it." She made a gesture to someone off-screen. The main holographic display on the glyptal bridge shifted. The view of the human ship was replaced by a tactical schematic of the entire nebula. The scattered human ships were highlighted. And then lines of light began to connect them, forming an impossibly complex web that spanned the entire star system. It was not a weapon array. It was something far more profound. "This is the Quantum Resonance Telescope," Reed's voice explained, as the glyptal command crew stared in utter disbelief. "Each of our ships is a node, projecting a field of stabilized spacetime. Together, they create a lens not for light but for reality itself. It allows us to observe the most fundamental vibrations of the cosmos, to hear the echoes of the universe's first moments, and to detect its faintest whispers of decay." The schematic zoomed in, showing intricate energy patterns, data streams of unimaginable complexity flowing between the human ships. They had turned the entire nebula into a single galaxy-sized sensor. The sheer scale of the engineering, the breathtaking audacity of the concept, was beyond anything the glyptal had ever conceived. Their own technology, for all its perfection and power, was rigid. This was fluid, adaptive, colossal. "We did not come here to break your silence," Ambassador Reed continued, her voice now filled with a profound and ancient sorrow. "We came here because this is the quietest place in this quadrant of the galaxy. We came here to listen to the universe dying." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle into the stunned consciousness of the glyptal commanders. "The elders warned you about humans. That is the translation our archives give for the core precept of your law regarding us. Our linguists and philosophers have studied the fragments of your ancient languages that we have been able to gather. They believe your translation may be incomplete. The original warning, they theorize, was not to beware of us. The warning was that we would be the ones to arrive and tell you that your silence was about to be broken forever, that we would be the harbingers, not of a war between our species, but of a war for existence itself." On the bridge of the harmony of judgment, there was no resonance. There was only a profound, echoing void. Vorlag's obsidian form was perfectly still, his martial certainty shattered into a million fragments of disbelief. Xylo stared at the image of the human instrument. A web of light spun across the sacred darkness and felt the foundations of his reality crumble. The humans were not a chaotic plague. They were watchmen on the edge of oblivion. Their frantic expansion, their messy, adaptable technology, their short, urgent lives, it was not a sign of inferiority. It was the desperate, focused adaptation of a species that had seen the abyss and had resolved to stare back into it. The elders had warned them, and they had been listening all along, but to the wrong thing. They had guarded their silence so fiercely that they had become deaf to the scream that was hidden within it. The data flowed from the human flagship to the harmony of judgment in a torrent of pure, unassailable information. It was not the chaotic noise the Glyptal had expected, but a stream of elegant, terrifying mathematics. It painted a picture of the universe that was profoundly and fundamentally wrong. Xylo watched, his crystalline mind, capable of processing trillions of calculations per second, struggling to absorb the implications. He saw visualizations of the entropic cascade, the cosmic rust as the humans poetically and grimly called it. It was a slow-moving front, originating from somewhere beyond the known boundaries of their galaxy, a wave of subtle wrongness that was not destroying matter, but rather simplifying it. Complex quantum states resolved into simpler ones. The delicate dance of virtual particles in the quantum foam was slowly, inexorably ceasing. It was the heat death of the universe, not as a distant, theoretical end, but as an active, encroaching predator. On the command nexus, the Glyptal officers stood like statues, their inner lights flickering with the pale, unsteady glow of dawning horror. They ran the human data through their own sensor logs, recalibrating their systems to look for absence instead of presence, for silence instead of sound. And they found it. The anomaly was there. It had been in their data for millennia, dismissed as background noise, as sensor drift, as insignificant deviations from the norm. Their obsession with harmony had rendered them blind to the creeping dissonance that heralded the end of all things. Their universe had been quietly bleeding out, and they had been polishing the chalice while ignoring the spreading stain. Sentinel Prime Vorlag was the most affected. His entire existence was predicated on a single, simple truth, the superiority and permanence of the Glyptal way. He was the shield of a perfect, ordered civilization against the chaos of the outside. But this data showed that the chaos was not external. It was woven into the fabric of reality itself, a fundamental flaw in creation. His life's purpose, the defense of his people, had been focused on the wrong enemy. He had been preparing for a storm while the ground beneath his feet was dissolving. His obsidian form, which had pulsed with such unshakable conviction, now seemed to shrink, the light within him dimming to a faint, bruised purple. He did not speak. He did not resonate. He simply stood, a monument to a shattered worldview. It was Xylo who finally broke the silence, his own thoughts a complex chord of terror, awe, and a strange, burgeoning respect for the creatures they had so thoroughly underestimated. He directed his resonance toward the holographic image of Ambassador Reed, which had remained patient and somber on the main screen. "Why?" Xylo asked, the single word encompassing a universe of questions. "Why did you not broadcast this to the galaxy? Why come here in secret? Why risk our wrath?" Ambassador Reed's expression was one of immense, compassionate sorrow. Because, High Luminary, how does one announce the end of the world without causing a panic that would precipitate it? We have known about this for centuries. Our first discovery of the cascade led to a period in our own history we call the Great Despair. Civilizations can be fragile. The knowledge of inevitable doom can break a people's will to live, to create, to strive. We learned we could not simply shout the truth from the rooftops. We had to understand it first. We had to find hope or a path toward it before we could share the burden of the knowledge. She continued, her voice a calm, steady anchor in tea. He stormed of their realization. We came here in secret because we needed to be sure. We needed to measure the cascade's advance with precision. We needed to understand its nature. And we needed to know if we were alone in our awareness. We analyzed your public transmissions, your historical records, your cultural philosophy. We saw your reverence for order and silence, and we suspected that you would be blind to this kind of threat. To approach you with this truth without incontrovertible proof would have been seen as an act of madness or a declaration of war. We had to build the telescope, we had to gather the data, and we had to present it to you when you came to confront us. It was a terrible risk, but it was the only logical path. Her logic was flawless. It was also deeply ethical, a form of paternalistic compassion that the Glyptal, in their detached arrogance, had never considered. The humans had not only seen the truth, but had shouldered the terrible burden of how to reveal it, protecting other species from a knowledge they were not yet equipped to handle. Their apparent chaos, their rapid expansion, it was not born of greed, but of desperation. They were searching for answers, for allies, for a safe harbor from a storm that would consume everything. "What is your plan?" Xylo asked, the question now one of a student to a teacher. "What can be done?" "The cascade cannot be stopped," Reed said, her words stark and final. It is not an enemy fleet to be fought. It is a change in the state of the universe. It cannot be reversed, but its advance is slow. By our calculations, it will not reach this sector of the galaxy for another 100,000 of your years, but it is accelerating, and other galaxies have already gone dark. The implication was chilling. The universe was larger and older than the Glyptal had ever truly comprehended, and they were but a small island in a vast, dying ocean. So we are doomed, a junior officer resonated, a pulse of pure despair. No, Reed said, her voice firm, cutting through the rising tide of fear. We are not. We do not believe in unwinnable scenarios. We believe in changing the parameters of the problem. If we cannot save the universe, then we must learn to survive it, or to leave it. The idea was, again, so radical it bordered on blasphemy. To leave the universe, to transcend the known dimensions of spacetime. It was the stuff of myth, of religious fantasy. But the humans, it was now clear, were a species that had been forced to take myth and turn it into engineering. For generations, the ambassador explained, while one part of humanity built the tools to listen to the decay, another has been working on the answer. We have been searching for anomalies, for loopholes in reality, places where the laws of physics are more pliable, ancient gateways, theoretical pathways to other, younger realities. We believe they exist, but finding them requires a level of observational power that even we do not possess alone. She looked at them, her gaze sweeping across the stunned Glyptal on the bridge. You have spent millennia perfecting the art of maintaining harmony. Your technology, your minds, they are exquisitely tuned to maintaining stable energy fields, to creating order from chaos. We can see the approaching storm. We believe you hold the key to building the ship that can withstand its passage. It was an offer, an alliance, not one of master and servant or of conqueror and conquered, but one of equals, a partnership of two vastly different species, their strengths and weaknesses perfectly complementing one another. The humans, with their urgent, adaptable curiosity, were the eyes. The Glyptal, with their long, patient mastery of order and energy, would be the hands. Together, they would build an ark. Xylo turned to Vorlag. The Sentinel Prime's inner light was no longer dim, but was swirling with a turbulent, complex pattern of emotions. He had been prepared to annihilate these beings. He had viewed them as vermin. Now he was being told they were not only his equals, but perhaps the only hope for his entire civilization's survival. He slowly raised his multifaceted head and focused on the image of the human ambassador. His resonance was quiet, stripped of all its former arrogance. It was a sound of profound and painful humility. We have been wrong, he projected. Our harmony was a prison of our own design. We were so focused on the perfection of our own crystal that we failed to see the mountain it was a part of was crumbling. We accept your proposal. It was a turning point. In that single moment, millennia of Glyptal tradition were swept aside by the cold, hard light of an existential threat. The Celestial Armada, a fleet of war, was now a fleet of scientific escort. The ultimatum was forgotten, replaced by a torrent of data exchange, of shared knowledge, of two species beginning the monumental task of trusting one another. Xylo felt a sense of profound relief, but it was overshadowed by the sheer, crushing scale of the task ahead. It was a hope born not of comfort, but of shared terror. As the initial plans for collaboration were being laid, as Glyptal and human scientists began a dialogue that would reshape the future of both their species, Ambassador Reed held up a hand, signaling for a moment of pause. There is one more thing, she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, imbued with a sense of reverence that sent a chill through even the crystalline Glyptal. The quantum resonance telescope was not built only to map the cascade. Its primary purpose was to listen into it. We reasoned that if this is a universal phenomenon, other civilizations, in other times and other galaxies, must have faced it as well. We have been searching the noise for a signal, for a sign that someone, somewhere, had found a way. She closed her eyes for a moment, as if gathering her strength. For 50 years, we heard nothing but the static of a dying cosmos. But last week, after we finished the final calibration of the array here in the perfect quiet of the Silentium, we found it. She gestured again, and the main screen on the Glyptal bridge changed once more. The tactical display vanished, replaced by a complex waveform. It was mostly static, a visual representation of the quantum decay, the hissing of unraveling reality. But within it, faint and impossibly ancient, was a pattern. A clear, unmistakable, structured signal. It was not a language they could understand. It was more fundamental than that. It was a sequence of pure mathematics, a message encoded in the universal constants. A lament, a warning, and a map. "It is a message," Reed whispered as the Glyptal stared, transfixed. "From a civilization in the Andromeda Galaxy. Based on the redshift and the degradation of the signal, we believe it was sent over 2 million years ago. They were facing the Cascade then. They were broadcasting their epitaph, but it is also their legacy." The waveform was translated into a star chart. It showed a path, a series of coordinates leading not to a star or a planet, but to a point of profound gravitational anomaly, a place where spacetime itself was warped into a stable, non-Euclidean structure. A gateway, a sanctuary. The final words of a long-dead civilization, a final, desperate act of hope, sent out into the void for anyone who might be listening. "They called it the Ark," Reed said, her voice thick with emotion. "They could not stop the end, so they built a new beginning." Xylo looked from the ancient, hopeful map to the face of the human ambassador, and then to the faces of his own people, their eternal, ordered lives now given a sudden, desperate purpose. The fear was immense, a cosmic dread that threatened to shatter his very being. But for the first time, it was not the fear of the unknown. It was the fear of a challenge to be met. The silence had been broken, not by the clamor of a chaotic enemy, but by the whisper of a shared fate and the promise of a united future. The elders had warned them that humanity would come, and that no one would listen until it was too late. They had been wrong on one crucial point. It was not too late. It was just in time. The age of splendid Glyptal isolation was over. The age of galactic survival had just begun.